I would like to thank the Greenville County Library for sponsoring these Tuesday talks. And I want to point out to you, I'm sure you saw it on the back table, they have brought out their collection of materials from the library here that relate to our subject, which of course tonight is Lucille Ball. And these are all available for checkout. So if you see something of interest, you want to try out one of the DVDs or CDs or books, then with your library card, you can check it out. If you have a library card, but you don't happen to have it with you, I discovered this just recently when I came across a book I really wanted to get, and I realized, it's sitting on my nightstand at home. They said, well, that's okay. You have your driver's license. And I could use my driver's license to check out. It was as easy as using my little green card. So that is an option if you would like to check something out. So they have the materials on display. And if you don't have a library card, of course, I always encourage you to get a library card. One of the best deals in the world is a library card. Benjamin Franklin approves. I can also mention that our Winter Chautauqua is coming up in just a couple of weeks. And we're going to have, as we celebrate celebrities, of American celebrities of the 20th century, we are going to, of course, hear tonight about Lucille Ball. Last time we all met here, we heard about Charlie Chaplin. Well, for the Winter Chautauqua, Charlie Chaplin will be here for 5 shows in our area. So you want to turn out to see, or is it 4 shows in our area? 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess it's 4 shows in our area. So we'll be at the Spartanburg Library. We will be at, I think it's Simpsonville's Arts Theater, and we'll be at Wade Hampton High School, which, of course, from here would be the closest and most centralized location. So, we have the literature back there. Check that. Come and see Jeremy Meyer presenting Charles Chaplin. Jeremy Meyer, you have seen him do Steve Jobs, and you've seen him do Robert Kennedy. So I think everyone has been very, very impressed by his performances in the past. There is information over on the table. And of course, for the Winter Chautauqua, for the Summer Chautauqua Festival, which is not just 2 or 3 days, but the Summer Chautauqua Festival, which is a 10-day event with 5 different performers, we can always use volunteers. So if you have any inclination to being a volunteer, then check it out at the table over there. Volunteer. It could be something as simple as handing out brochures or collecting donations at the end, or helping people to find parking spots or where the bathroom is. Simple things that really, really help out as we're doing these shows. Because as you all know from the incredible fee you paid today, there's the funding is generated by having volunteers help out to make everything work. It makes a big, big difference. So thank you for those of you who would consider doing that. My job here now is to introduce you to our speaker for the evening, covering, of course, the topic of Lucille Ball. Our speaker is a graduate of Mount Holyoke College who earned her PhD from Duke University. Her achievements include numerous academic teaching awards, and she has served as both the former chair of the history department as well as the chair of the faculty at our own local Furman University, where she specializes in recent U.S. history and American women's history. Prior to coming to Furman, she has taught at the University of North Carolina, at the University of Montana, at the University of Virginia, and at Phillips Exeter Academy. She is a long-time enthusiastic supporter, one of those volunteers I was talking about. She has been very helpful with our Greenville Chautauqua and also serves on our board of directors. So it is my pleasure to introduce your speaker for tonight, Dr. Marion Strobel.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, let me start out by saying I'm not the most techy person in the world, so if I mess things up with the slideshow, don't panic. That's my thing. I had trouble a week or two ago at Chick-fil-A trying to order a sandwich and French fries. Seriously, I'm not joking. All righty, wonderful topic tonight, and I'm delighted to see so many of you here. Let me start out by saying that writing in March 1953, journalist Jack Gold proclaimed in the New York Times that, quote, "I Love Lucy" is arguably the most misleading title imaginable. For once, all available statistics are in agreement. Millions love Lucy. Obviously, what Gold was referring to was the hit half-hour television program that had first aired in October 1951 and would go on to become the most watched television show in the United States in 4 of the 6 seasons of its run. I Love Lucy invented the genre of the situation comedy and brought much of American daily life to a halt when it regularly aired on Monday nights at 9 o'clock on CBS. At the center of the program, of course, was the irrepressible redhead Lucille Ball, a character who exuded wackiness, splendid comedic timing, and grit. Aiding and abetting Lucy's antics was a stellar ensemble of cast members who have long since entered the pantheon of American television legends. As we look at I Love Lucy from the perspective of 70 plus years, we must ask, how did this television program come to be? And most importantly, who was Lucille Ball, the actress around whom the show circulated? Lucille Ball was not of Hollywood royalty. She was the product of small-town America. Lucille Desiree Ball was born in August 1911 in Jamestown, New York, which is here, if you can see it. It's on the Pennsylvania border, be a little bit northwest of Pittsburgh. So nowhere's New York City or anything of that sort. Very snowy area, which is relevant in today's world. She was born to Henry Had Ball and Desiree Dee Hunt Ball. Her father, Lucille's father, was a lineman for Bell Telephone, and that meant frequent moves for his job, including to Montana and New Jersey. When Lucille was only 3 and living outside Detroit, her father fell seriously ill in the wake of a sleet storm when trying to keep his crew together and telephones working. His condition worsened, and Had Ball died of typhoid fever. He was only 28, and his wife was not yet 23 and was 5 months pregnant with child number 2, a boy to be named Fred. Years later, Lucille would write, "I remember vividly the moment my mother told me Daddy was gone. I noticed on the kitchen windowsill some little gray sparrows feeding. I've been superstitious about birds ever since. Pictures of birds get me. I won't buy anything with the print of a bird, and I won't stay in a hotel room with bird pictures or bird wallpaper." Thus, the drama of losing her father had lingering effects on Lucille and obviously lasted throughout her life. Upon her husband's death, Dee Dee Ball returned to her family home in New York, where she lived with her parents and children in Celeron, a summer resort village on the shores of Lake Chautauqua. And let me see here. Here is the home in which Lucille was actually born. These are her parents, Had and Dee Dee. But she returned to, her mother came back, and here's Lucille Ball as a child. Very cute little girl. Also living in the home were Lucille's aunt and uncle. 4 years after Had Ball's death, Dee Dee remarried to Edward Peterson, also of the Jamestown area. Ed Peterson was not as affectionate as Lucille's birth father had been, and she would later write about him, quote, "Ed was never mean or abusive, but his presence in the house was shadowy." Soon, Dee Dee and Ed headed to Detroit in search of work, leaving little Fred with Dee Dee's doting parents and Lucille with the Petersons, Ed's folks. The cheerless Petersons were from Sweden, were strict Christians, they were perfectionists, and they were full of distrust and suspicion. To Lucille, anything that gave pleasure lapsed into one of the 7 deadly sins and was therefore devil's bait. This included looking in mirrors, which were pretty much banned in the Peterson household except for the bathroom. To Lucille, Grandma Peterson saw to it that Satan found no mischief for idle hands. This meant hard work for the high-spirited Lucille, but from the Petersons, she did learn discipline, domestic skills, and also a love of gardening and flowers. Further, Lucille said she learned to live in my imagination and to step inside other people's skins, indispensable abilities for an actress. Less positively, she would remember, quote, I have my grandmother Peterson to thank for the gnawing sense of unworthiness and insecurity that haunted me for years. The Puritan idea that everything pleasurable is somehow bad almost ruined for me the first joys of our big I Love Lucy success. The hardest thing for me was getting used to the idea that I deserved praise. Eventually, Dee Dee and Ed returned from Detroit, and Lucille had her mother back. In 1920, Lucille's grandfather Hunt, Dee Dee's father, purchased a house in Celeron that was large enough for Lucille's entire maternal family so they could all live together. Lucille adored her new home and being with her maternal rather than paternal grandparents. She was delighted when her Aunt Lola gave birth to baby Cleo, who Lucille would regard as a little sister and who would go on as an adult to be a producer for Lucille's radio and television programs. From the get-go, Lucille loved acting. She would enlist family members, including Cleo and little brother Fred, in what she later called her repertory company that would put on plays for the family. Inspiration for these plays came from the Celeron amusement park that was across a daisy field and railroad track from Lucille's home. The band shell of the park featured numerous plays and concerts. Its entertainment served as a place of inspiration for Lucille. In her freshman year in high school, Lucille, encouraged by her teachers, participated in an amateur production of Charlie's Aunt, the play. In looking back on the production, Lucille would say, with Charlie's Aunt, I knew for the first time that wonderful feeling that comes from getting real laughs on a stage. I not only played the male lead, but I sold the tickets, swept up the stage afterwards, and turned out the lights. She would go on to participate in numerous musicals and dramatic offerings during her high school years. At one point, Lucille even participated in a Miss Celeron bathing beauty contest and came in as a runner-up. This was a miracle. She was 5'7" and weighed less than 100 pounds. She clearly had no curves. When she was not yet 15, Lucille fell madly in love with Johnny DeVita, an Italian boy of almost 23. Johnny was from a prosperous Jamestown family, but had a reputation for being a local hoodlum. Some sources suggest Johnny was even abusive toward Lucille. This situation was not acceptable to Lucille's mother, Dee Dee, and she became determined to remove Lucille from Johnny's grasp. The solution? Send Lucille to the John Murray Anderson School for the Dramatic Arts in New York City, where Betty Davis would become a fellow student. It should be noted that at this time a tragedy occurred. A neighborhood boy was paralyzed by a stray bullet from tin can target practice at Lucille's home. The child's spinal cord was severed. Endless lawsuits ensued, all aimed at Lucille's grandfather, Hunt. He owned the family home and had been supervising the target practice. The upshot was that the family lost their beloved home and all its furnishings. They were forced to move into a small apartment in Jamestown. Lucille had to transfer to a new high school that she hated, and she began to run away. This situation, on top of Lucille's romance with Johnny DeVita, hardened Dee Dee's determination to send Lucille to New York. She would take out a bank loan to send her to the John Murray School of Acting. But acting lessons in New York did not go well. Lucille was shy, lonely, homesick, and lost. She would later write that the heads of the school, quote, discovered that I couldn't sing, I couldn't dance, I couldn't control my body or my voice properly. She added, both students and teachers ignored me. The school soon sent Dee Dee a letter informing her that she would be wasting her money if Lucille stayed at the institution. Lucille was too embarrassed to return to Jamestown, so she trudged the streets of New York looking for work. One day, she only had 4 cents in her pocket, but Lucille kept trying. She found some short-term work and used the pseudonym Diane Belmont to seem more glamorous. Eventually, she became a model and used her own name. A big break came when Lucille was hired by Hattie Carnegie, the owner of an internationally famous dress shop. It was there that Lucille endured the kicks and pinches of Carnegie as she learned to bend her knees correctly and to showcase her chest properly. At times, she said, she felt like a well-dressed dummy. Yet Lucille adored Carnegie, who fired her and rehired her at least once a week. It was in the dress salon that Lucille learned much about the world and where she met people who introduced her to New York City nightlife and to an endless parade of beaux. It was also in New York that Lucille developed a bad case of rheumatoid arthritis, in part due to a poor diet and inadequate rest. She was still in her teens when this distressing and very painful condition emerged. Despite the aid of Hattie Carnegie's own physician, there was nothing for Lucille to do but to return home to Jamestown. She remained in terrible pain for months, underwent experimental horse serum injections, and had to wear heavy 20-pound weight in one of her ugly black orthopedic shoes. Over the course of several years, Lucille's condition improved, and she started acting again, this time in a local production of a Broadway play called Scottish Rite Review. The Jamestown Journal described her performance as sensational. The play moved on to the Chautauqua Institute, again to rave reviews. Lucille's confidence in her abilities grew. Further, for the play, she dyed her blonde hair to a reddish cast. As Lucille would later put it, for the first time I began to wonder if maybe I didn't have a redhead personality. Were truer words ever spoken by an actress? It was in the early 1930s that Lucille moved back to New York City, eventually living with her brother, her mother, who by then had separated from Ed, and her grandfather, Hunt. She made ends meet by modeling and posing for commercial illustrators. A freelance painter did an oil portrait of Lucille that was sold to Chesterfield Cigarettes. She became the Chesterfield girl, and her picture appeared all over New York City, including high above Times Square. This is a later picture of her as a Chesterfield girl. I couldn't find the original one. These professional exposure led to the offers of short-term work on Broadway as a chorus girl. And also as a last-minute addition to a movie being filmed in Hollywood. Lucille had been recruited as a Golden Girl for Roman Scandals, a movie starring Eddie Cantor and Gloria Stewart. The move to Hollywood was unexpected, and as Lucille would later explain, I was one of the lucky few to arrive in movie land with a contract. I was already under a studio's protective wing. In those days, that was a blessed way to begin. Filming of Roman Scandals was calculated to last for 6 weeks. The production stretched to 6 months. In the process, the studio shaved off Lucille's eyebrows in an attempt to give her the Jean Harlow look. For the rest of her life, she would reach for an eyebrow pencil the first thing in the morning. Throughout the 1930s, Lucille, now pretty much permanently residing in California, had small parts as a movie contract player. The Golden Girls were frequently farmed out to other studios. Lucille made a variety of movies under various company logos. And most of those early jobs, she did not receive a credit at the end of a film. Her name was never listed. She was often just part of the glamorous scenery. What did happen, however, is that Lucille began to date other men and finally got Johnny DeVita of Jamestown out of her system. On the advice of friends, she also began to realize that perhaps comedy was her strong suit. She would later write, "I took the slapstick parts the other starlets spurned and never whined about the siphon water and pies in the face. I considered myself lucky to be paid while learning a business I adored." Lucille was a workaholic and understood the need to keep active, despite the unsteadiness of the show business industry. Lucille earned a part in Roberta, 1935, starring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. What was most important about the film was that it led to the introduction of Lela Rogers, Ginger Rogers' mother. Under RKO auspices, it was Lela who mothered numerous starlets and also acted as a wise mentor to them. To Lucille, Lela was the first woman to see me as a clown with glamour. She pulled my frizzy hair back off my brow and I had a couple of my side teeth straightened. Then she sent me to a voice teacher and told me to lower my high, squeaky voice by 4 tones. Lela Rogers' influence proved to be transformative as Lucille continued with her career. She would remain grateful to her for the rest of her life. Other work followed, including Ginger Rogers and Katharine Hepburn in Stage Door in 1937. Lucille continued to make other movies as well and became known as the Queen of the Bees. Meanwhile, Lucille also appeared on the radio, such as in Jack Haley's The Wonder Show. Such an experience was invaluable. To Lucille, radio work gave me a name in the trade as a good feminine foil. I could flip a comedy line, which a lot of actresses could not do. In radio, I couldn't depend on props or costumes or makeup. I had to rely on timing and tone of voice for comic effects, and this was invaluable training. So too were numerous developing friendships with actresses Ann Sothern, Carole Lombard, and with numerous actors who were much older than Lucille. She also developed a close professional bond with Gail Gordon, who would work with Lucille for close to 50 years. By 1940, Lucille was earning the princely sum of $1,000 a week. She bought herself a fur coat and retained the services of a personal maid. In early 1940, Lucille was back in New York for Publicity Pictures. She took a tumble on the Rockefeller Center ice ring while doing a public relations stunt. She ended up in the hospital. Upon her recovery, friends took Lucille to see the Broadway musical Too Many Girls that starred a young nightclub entertainer by the name of Desi Arnaz. He was cast as a South American football player who strummed the guitar, banged a bongo drum, and danced the conga. Lucille could not take her eyes off Desi, but did not meet him in person until several months later in California, where he showed up to make a movie version of Too Many Girls, in which Lucille would also appear. Desi, of course, was not South American. He was Cuban. His father was a doctor of pharmacology who had served as the mayor of the city of Santiago, Cuba, for a decade. His mother was a famous beauty and an heir to the Bacardi rum fortune. The family and its great wealth fell victim to a revolution in Cuba in the early 1930s when Desi was a teenager. The Arnaz family had to flee for their lives, and eventually Desi and his father ended up penniless in Miami. The duo lived in a warehouse where they chased rats to keep them away from their food. In 1936, when Desi was 19, he auditioned for a rumba band at a Miami hotel and played what later became his signature song, Babalu. Some of you, I'm sure, remember it. He got the job. Band leader Xavier Cugat caught Desi's act one night and asked him to audition. This began a long professional relationship between the two men that culminated in Desi forming his own band and appearing at the La Conga nightclub in New York City, where the conga dance became a smash hit. It was this background that Desi Arnaz brought with him when he met Lucille Ball. She would go on to write, quote, "Everyone at the studio knew I was starry-eyed about Desi, and most of them warned me against him. He's a flash in the pan, I was told. And he's too young for you." There was a 6-year age difference. Or, "He's a dyed-in-the-wool Catholic and you're Protestant," and so on. But I had flipped. After filming Too Many Girls wrapped up, Debbie's movie contract was extended, and he was allowed to go on the road for 6 months a year with his band. The romance with Lucille continued, despite this 6-year age difference and dramatically different backgrounds. Lucille always described Desi's early upbringing as that of a young prince, while she had, quote, been looking for a penny to make subway fare in New York. He was a romantic who gambled, drank, loved beautiful women, and never thought of tomorrow. In comparison, Lucille was a level-headed realist who described herself as never living beyond my means. Yet the two fell head over heels in love, despite frequent spats that often were occasioned by long stints away from each other. But the relationship somehow flourished. It was Desi who took the initiative. He planned a surprise elopement for November 30th, 1940, to take place in Greenwich, Connecticut, between his shows at the Roxy in New York. Complications, of course, ensued, what with Lucille's wardrobe being in Milwaukee with her maid, the couple needing to convince the judge in Connecticut to waive the required 5-day waiting period for nuptials, and then to move the ceremony from the judge's chambers to the more romantic Byram River Beagle Club, a hunting lodge. Desi's late-night show at the Roxy was delayed, but the newlyweds did make it back in time for Desi to carry Lucille over the threshold of his dressing room to the applause of reporters and cheering fans. The couple stayed in New York for 6 weeks and then headed to California. After 6 months, they purchased a simple ranch house in Chatsworth in the San Fernando Valley, far from Hollywood's glamour. This was the house, and that is what that area of Chatsworth now looks like today. The house, according to Lucille, would be decorated, and these are her words, in early Victorian and bastard American. Flowers were everywhere. For his part, Desi, who was used to his family's past wealth, insisted on the construction of a swimming pool, plus the planting of groves of orange and lemon trees. Much of the work he did actually himself. The ranch, the family car, and Desi's first boat would all be christened Desilu, a combination of both Desi and Lucille's names. The early 1940s were the years of World War II, and Desi got drafted. Because of an old knee injury, he was not sent overseas. Instead, Desi stayed in Los Angeles, organizing and performing for USO shows for wounded servicemen. Desi was frequently absent from home, and this greatly upset Lucille, especially since the media often covered his glamorous nightlife escapades and bouts of roaring drunkenness. In 1944, she decided to divorce Desi, despite her great love for him. Lucille filed the appropriate papers in California, but backed out at the last moment, right before the final divorce decree was rendered. One night, Desi had come home unexpectedly. You can imagine what happened. Lucille put blinders on, and the marriage continued. During the 1940s, Lucille persevered with her movie career in Hollywood. Among the films that she made were The Big Street with Henry Fonda, Dewberry Was a Lady, and other movies with William Holden and Bob Hope. This seems impressive to me, yet she felt her career had stalled. Lucille was making good money, about $3,500 a week, but to her, the years were speeding by. I was still childless, and my dreams of co-starring with Desi and working side by side seemed hopeless. Then magic happened. As early as 1947, Lucille had been cast as Liz Cooper, an unconventional, scheming, and zany housewife on a CBS radio show entitled My Favorite Husband. She did so while continuing to make movies. But the radio show proved to be so successful that CBS asked Lucille to develop it for television, a new medium beginning to arrive in large numbers in American homes. She agreed, but insisted that Desi Arnaz had to be her co-star, thus fulfilling a long-held dream to work with her husband. CBS balked. Too controversial for the network was the premise of an interracial marriage between an all-American woman and a Latin man. To prove CBS wrong, Lucille and Desi went on a vaudeville tour that featured them as a married couple with the husband leading a band. The act was written by Bob Carroll and Madeline Pugh, who would go on to become long-term writers for all of Lucille's endeavors. The traveling show was a hit, and CBS ordered a pilot. Philip Morris, the cigarette company, was convinced to sponsor the show. What became I Love Lucy went into production in the spring and summer of 1951, but various challenges occurred. Lucille got pregnant after years of trying and miscarriages, and daughter Lucille Desiree Arnaz was born by cesarean section just weeks short of Lucille's 40th birthday. Lucille's recovery was slow, but ever the trooper, 6 weeks after the baby's birth, Lucille appeared on the set of the new show. Some interesting technical features emerged with I Love Lucy's production. Most television programs of the early 1950s were filmed live on the East Coast. West Coast viewers then saw images on low-quality kinescope. But remember, Lucy had a new baby and wanted to remain in California. So a deal was worked out. The show would be produced not on kinescope, but on high-quality film in California, and then shown that way on both the East and West Coasts. Lucille and Desi would take a $1,000 a week pay cut to cover the additional expense. In return, they would own 80% of I Love Lucy's films. The show would come under the control of Desilu Studios, their new company. Lucille and Desi also wanted a live studio audience, which meant that the traditional single-camera format could not be used. Desi came up with a 3-camera format that vastly improved production quality and efficiency. Also introduced were new uniform lighting techniques that eliminated shadows and the need to relight or refilm scenes. What did this mean? The quality of all television programs improved, and the concept of reruns was born. Rebroadcasts of popular shows became a television staple, and of course continues to this day. During the second season of I Love Lucy, Lucille and Desi learned that they were expecting a second child. The decision was made to incorporate the pregnancy into the show. However, CBS insisted on twin beds in bedroom scenes and would not allow the word pregnant to be used on air. So expecting became the preferred substitute. The episode in which Lucille gave birth to little Ricky was selected to coincide with the date chosen for Lucille's real-life delivery of Desi Jr. by cesarean section. The date was January 19th, 1953, the day before the inauguration of Dwight Eisenhower as US president. The show captured almost 72% of all US viewers, while the inauguration the next day captured only 67%. Little Ricky would grow up on the show in real time and would eventually be played by 5 different children. In other interesting aspects of I Love Lucy, it should be noted that William Frawley and Vivian Vance, Fred and Ethel Mertz, disliked each other in person, but definitely acted professionally while on the show. Frawley, a known heavy drinker, was contractually bound to keep sober during the run of I Love Lucy. He regarded Vance, 22 years younger than Frawley, as looking like a sack of doorknobs. For her part, Vance, only 2 years older than Lucille, resented the frumpy wardrobe that she was assigned to wear on the show and the fact that she played a much older woman. In the midst of I Love Lucy's success, a potential scandal erupted that threatened to derail the success of the show. The early 1950s, of course, were the years of the Red Scare that featured fears of communist infiltration in the United States government, in education, and also in Hollywood. In 1953, word leaked out that Lucille Ball, when registering to vote back in 1936, had listed her party affiliation as communist, as had her brother and mother. All had done so at the insistence of Lucille's beloved maternal grandfather, Hunt, a socialist. In September 1953, Lucille met voluntarily with an investigator from Congress. She did so in Hollywood. She admitted her earlier affiliation, but indicated that she personally had not had any dealings with communists. Lucille's sworn testimony seemed to satisfy the investigators. Coming to his wife's defense, Desi Arnaz publicly stated, quote, that the only thing red about Lucy is her hair, and even that is not legitimate. As previously noted, the original I Love Lucy series ran for 6 years. In 1957, the show pivoted to an hour-long format entitled The Lucille Ball Desi Arnaz Show. It became part of an anthology series produced by Desilu Studios. 13 episodes were made in all, and emphasized were big-name guest stars such as Tallulah Bankhead, who was there in that picture, Fred MacMurray, and Hedda Hopper. Rather than being set in New York City, the show was often set in Connecticut, where the Ricardo family had moved. In the new show, the roles of the Mertzes was somewhat diminished in order to feature the headliner guests. They were making lots of money. This is the house that replaced the Chatsworth house. This is on North Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills, and I've checked and the house is safe in case we're worried about fires. She will live there from 1954 to 1989. So they were doing well. The studio, the Desilu Studios, was flourishing. Desilu bought out RKO Studios in 1957, where Lucille and Desi had previously made movies. The combined company continued to expand. Here they are in director's chairs. At its peak, Desilu Productions was the largest and most prolific independent studio in the world, with 3 studio lots and 33 sound stages. It produced some of the most beloved television shows of the 1950s and 1960s, including Our Miss Brooks, Make Room for Daddy, The Dick Van Dyke Show, Mannix, The Untouchables, Star Trek, and Mission Impossible, and some of those others, Desilu was really going out on a limb, and it was Lucille Ball that insisted those be made. Desilu was not afraid of taking risks and of pushing social and cultural boundaries. In 1962, Lucille bought out Desi's shares of Desilu and took over the company herself. In the process, she became the first woman to run a major television production studio and one of the most powerful figures in Hollywood. 5 years later, in 1967, Lucille Ball would sell Desilu to Gulf Western for $17 million. The sale was equivalent to about $175 million in 2025's currency. The company that controlled the old Desilu empire today is known as CBS Studios. One, of course, occasioned Lucille Ball's purchase of Desilu from Desi Arnaz was her filing for divorce in the first half of 1960. She did so just one day after his 43rd birthday, when the last episode of the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour had been completed. In court papers, Lucille would claim that her 19-year marriage to Desi had been a nightmare and nothing like what was pictured on the television series of the 1950s. The divorce was not contentious. Lucille and Desi did remain friends after the divorce, and ever after, when Lucille starred in television shows of her own, she always was cast as an unmarried woman, each time a widow. A year after her divorce, Lucille Ball starred in the Broadway musical Wildcat. It was through co-star Paula Stewart that she was introduced to Gary Morton, a minor Borscht Belt comedian, 13 years her junior. Lucille would later write, "When I divorced Desi, I had no intention of ever marrying again, but this guy did seem to be too good to let go by." The two were married on November 19th, 1961, by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, one of the most famous clergy of the post-World War II era. The marriage would be a long-lasting one. Lucille would introduce Morton to the television business, and he would go on to serve as a producer at Desilu until the sale to Gulf Western. Morton would serve as Lucille's business manager and promoter for the rest of her life. Even while she was a studio head, Lucille Ball continued with her acting career. She starred in a series of sitcoms, The Lucille Ball Show, 1962-1968, and then Here's Lucy from 1968 to 1971. Both shows featured Vivian Vance and Gail Gordon and enjoyed modest success, but never captured the public's imagination as had the original I Love Lucy series. During those years, Lucille also made several movies, such as Yours, Mine, and Ours, and Mame. There she is as Mame. She regularly appeared as a guest on television shows such as those of Dick Van Dyke and Carol Burnett, who she had helped mentor back as early as 1959. And it should be noted that during her long television career, Lucille Ball appeared on the cover of TV Guide a record number of 39 times. That's a record. In 1985, Lucille took on a dramatic role in a made-for-TV movie entitled Stone Pillow. In it, Lucille played a homeless woman. Most reviews were not good. Critics and audiences alike wanted her to return to comedy. The following year, Lucille headlined yet another comedy series for CBS called Life with Lucy. The show did not develop much of an audience, and initial reviews were just awful. The show was canceled after only 8 episodes, but the effort did earn Lucille $2.3 million. It should be noted that over the years, Lucille Ball, according to all reports, became increasingly temperamental and blunt. As her biographer, Catherine Brady, has written, quote, "She hardened, she became brittle, striking many as a troubled, unhappy woman who could not express emotion. Those who knew her well explained her behavior with one striking image. She's been forced to put steel around her heart." This led to insensitivity and to contentious dealings with family and old friends, with beloved household help, with her longtime writers, and even with Vivian Vance, who had long become a dear friend. Another problem for Lucille Ball over the years was her complexion. Biographer Brady has explained years of heavy makeup and California sun, plus the passage of time, had so damaged Lucy's white skin that she now had to be photographed through a special lens with a scrim. Thus, she was seldom shown in close-ups with other actors, as the shots would not match those taken without the scrim. In person, she looked different from the woman people knew from television. During those years of the 1960s to the 1980s, Desi Arnaz worked on various development deals for new television shows and occasionally appeared as a guest on variety shows of one sort or another. He remarried in March 1963. Desi's participation in show business would decline after his second marriage. That marriage would last for 22 years until wife Edith's death. Arnaz instead turned to other activities. He owned a country club and a thoroughbred racing farm. He could frequently be found on his yacht or teaching classes on studio production and acting. He became an active Republican. But his health was not good. He suffered from diverticulitis, and he was an alcoholic who did not seek to deal with his addiction until the death of his second wife in 1985. A heavy smoker of cigarettes and cigars, Desi Arnaz developed lung cancer and died on December 2nd, 1986, at age 69, just 5 days before Lucille Ball was to be the recipient of Kennedy Center honors at which Desi was scheduled to speak. Desi Arnaz had written a statement that he planned to deliver at the Kennedy Center. Instead, it was read posthumously by actor Robert Stack. It ended with the words, P.S. I Love Lucy was never just a title. Lucille had last spoken to Desi by telephone on November 30th, what would have been their 46th wedding anniversary. Lucille Ball did not outlive Desi Arnaz by much. In late March 1989, she appeared at the Oscars with Bob Hope. She was wearing a glamorous gown slit to her waist. I didn't find any pictures of the slit, sorry. The couple were greeted by heartfelt and prolonged ovation. The next month, Lucille started to experience chest pains and was admitted to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where it was discovered she had a dissecting aortic aneurysm. Doctors successfully repaired the aorta and installed a valve replacement. But several days later, Lucille Ball awoke with severe back pain and lost consciousness. She died on April 26, 1989, of a ruptured aortic aneurysm, not directly related to her surgery. Lucille, age 77, was cremated upon her death. Her ashes were originally placed in a niche at the Forest Lawn Cemetery in Los Angeles, where her mother's ashes were also inurned. In 2002, the remains of both women were reinterred at the Hunt family plot at Lakeview Cemetery in Jamestown, New York. This was in accordance with the wishes of Lucille's children, who knew that their mother loved the change of seasons, so she needed to be in New York. Husband Gary Morton remarried in 1996 and died in 1999 of lung cancer in Palm Springs. He was just 74. By the time of their parents' deaths, Lucy and Desi Arnaz Jr. were grown and in their late 30s. Daughter Lucy, this is Lucille's mother, by the way, beautiful woman. Here's Lucy, the daughter, became a television actress and singer in musical theater. She also appeared in a movie or two. Lucy is married and is the mother of 3 grown children. Although living in Palm Springs, she has been especially active in preserving her parents' legacy. Also meriting attention is Lucy's editing and publication of her mother's memoir, Love, Lucy, originally written in 1966. Here's the book, and I thoroughly recommend that one. The manuscript had been unpublished and was rediscovered in dusty files after Lucille Ball's death. And Lucy, the daughter, edits it. Lucille had written the book in the 60s upon the suggestion of her dear friend, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, and it is truly a treasure. Desi Arnaz Jr., there he is today, has also worked with his sister to support the work of preserving his parents' memory. Over the years, he had well-publicized love affairs with a variety of women, including Patty Duke and Liza Minnelli. But he did have a long marriage of 35 years to his wife, Amy, who died. In terms of work, Desi Jr. has been an actor and more famously a drummer. Both Lucy and Desi had much to be proud of in regard to their heritage. Mother Lucille received many honors before her death and after. In addition to the usual sidewalk stars of fame in Hollywood and the Kennedy Center honors, she was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President George H.W. Bush in 1989, just a few months after her death. In 1996, the Lucille Ball Desi Arnaz Museum opened its doors in Jamestown, New York. In 2016, it would be joined there by the National Comedy Center. The Little Theater of Jamestown has been renamed in Lucille's honor. In 2001, the United States Postal Service celebrated what would have been Lucille's 90th birthday with a commemorative stamp. The same year, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in Seneca Falls, New York. In 2009, a statue of Lucille Ball was erected in Celeron, New York. It was deemed not accurate and actually scary. So it was replaced by one that was more complimentary a few months later. Here's the new one. But in the meantime, Scary Lucy became a huge tourist attraction. So what I understand is that both statues still exist and are about 75 yards apart. I don't know. Now, as for Desi, this is interesting. He has 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And just this past October, I'm talking 2024, the city of Miami, Florida, erected a marker in Collins Park in honor of Arnaz's musical career launch in Miami. Needless to say, over the years, numerous television and movies have been celebrating the career of Lucille Ball and her partnership with Desi Arnaz, most recently the movie being The Ricardos. So the legacy of Lucille Ball continues to enchant us well over a century after her birth. It is obvious from this talk that it is impossible to discuss her without mentioning Desi Arnaz and the many actors, writers, friends, and family members who contributed to her success. In the memory of many critics, Lucille Ball reached the comedic heights of Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, also known as the Beethoven and Mozart of comedy. Through incredible hard work and perseverance, she became one of the most famous and beloved women of the 20th century, and perhaps the only one whose work remains readily available for viewing even 35 years after her death. As Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Wendy Wasserstein, one of my college classmates, once described Lucille Ball in the New York Times, she said, "She was a rebel in a house dress who believed that subversion begins at home." Wasserstein added, "For those of us girls who grew up knowing we were funny," and Wasserstein was funny, believe me, Lucy made it all right to say it out loud. I agree, but we must remember that Lucille Ball was much more than just a comedian. She was also a devoted family member, mentor, and accomplished business executive of a major corporation. She appeared to be able to do it all before that goal became a desired accomplishment of American women. In this sense alone, Lucille Ball is well-deserving to be included in the Greenville Chautauqua 2025 theme of American celebrity. I salute her. Thank you.
And now we come to the part of the program where you get a chance to ask questions. I'm sure some things popped up in your minds as you heard today's presentation about the life of Lucille Ball. And if you have any questions for Dr. Marion Strobel, Then please raise your hand. We'll bring you a microphone. We have a microphone over there, a microphone right here, and we have a question right in the front.
Well, certain things are relative, relevant for me. Number one being, I knew Wendy Wasserstein when she lived in 1839 because I used to hang out there at Mount Holyoke.
Okay, well, that's my.
I went to school in Amherst, so.
Okay, she was a fellow history major.
Yeah.
But she did European history.
It was great.
She used to wear a beat-up old raccoon or mink coat to class. She wore like a bathrobe.
She and I both agreed that we were both mystics, which meant we were both just zany college kids, but it was fun. But what I wanted to ask you about was this. My family's from Jamestown, New York. They had a home in Chautauqua Institution. And my grandfather always claimed that Lucille Ball lived across the street from him when she was a little girl, and she would sit on his lap. As I wrote a friend of mine who I went to law school with today, that was in the day before, if you had a little kid sit on your lap, there was an irrebuttable presumption that you were a pervert. But in any case, I heard about this from my parents and everything, and I looked it up. I searched these addresses today, and I couldn't find that he lived on the same street at all. So maybe I don't know what went on, but she grew up in. What I wanted to ask you about, she grew up in Celeron.
Yeah.
Is that a part of Jamestown, or is that a separate municipality?
Mary Kay, are you here? Mary, can you answer that? Mary Kay is from that area. Right outside Jamestown. I think, from what I was reading this afternoon, doing a little extra research, it had a little less expensive cost of living than Jamestown. But I don't know. That's what the one author said.
Would it be being fed malarkey or McGillicuddy?
Larry?
A few people got that. More than I deserved. Okay.
Larry, Mary Kay wants to say something over here.
I'm from the same hometown, Jamestown, New York. And when I was 9 years old, Lucy and Desi made their premiered their movie called
The Long Trailer?
No, was it that one? Anyways, they canceled school for the afternoon. They came in by helicopter and landed on the field behind Jamestown High School. And there was a huge parade downtown. And I was in the crowd with my family and friends, and I saw her chauffeur-driven car go by, and all I could see was her red hair. But my sister snuck into the hotel where they were staying, and Desi kissed her on the cheek.
Wow.
The same parts at the same time, before Lucy got to town, she requested a poker game, yes. And my father, who played poker with some professional businessmen in town, got to play poker with Lucy. And my great uncle owned a bar on Chautauqua Lake. I don't know the connection, but that's where the poker game was held. And the next day, he made us promise never to repeat that story again because she took everybody's money. So I never did. And several years ago, I was at my son's home telling this story about my father playing poker with Lucy, and he thought I made it up. I said, well, I was sworn to secrecy, never to tell that story, and that was the first time I ever repeated that story. That's my claim to fame.
Was she, it was very interesting you mentioned this because she, and particularly in her later years, when she was at home in the house on North Roxbury Drive, she spent an incredible amount of time playing games. She played backgammon all the time. and I think cribbage and other things of that sort. But that's how she occupied her time in her later years.
She was ahead of her time in many, many ways. So we're very proud of Lucille Ball.
And I'm sure that the museums, and I happen to have here some of their brochures here, are big money makers for Jamestown, New York, which is not, I'm sure it's pretty desolate up there right now. I'm from Rochester, New York, so I can say these things.
And we have a question right here in the middle.
Yes.
Hey there. Thanks so much for an excellent expose. One question about the Desilu Studios. They did a lot of television productions. Did they
Yes.
choose not to do movie productions?
Mainly they're television. Everything I've read suggests they were television. Of course, they had those 33 sound stages. And so I think that was sort of their big thing. And again, they went out on a limb with Star Trek and Mission Impossible and some of those. But I think that was pretty much where they concentrated. And they had huge hits. I mean, that would have been a major job taking care of that. Nothing that I read suggested anything. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. But the sources, of course, this book, which I used for a lot of her quotes, was again written in 1966 and again buried in a cloud. Was co-written with somebody, but it was buried until she died. And so I never saw any references to her with these other powerful women, or being involved in kind of the political feminist scene. No mention that I saw of it, but it's a great question.
Other questions? Show of hands. Going once. You have one online. Cool. So let me repeat that just in case people didn't hear it. Is it true that her step paternal grandparents put her in a leash and tied her up outside the home as a part of their strictness?
I'm not absolutely sure about that, but everything that I read suggested that it would not be impossible, and that the author, Kathleen Brady, suggests that her upbringing with the Petersons, her stepfather's parents, was something out of the bad stories out of Grimm's fairy tales. I mean, it was the evil step parents. This was classic. So it wouldn't surprise me, because again, it was very grim. Everything that I've read about this particularly the mother, the grandfather didn't get involved too much.
All right. Any other questions? Now, we're going to be having, of course, a presentation next month on the life of Einstein. And between now and then, we will be having our winter festival with Charlie Chaplin in attendance. So be sure to mark that in your calendars. The information is available online at greenvillechautauqua.org. Or if you don't want to try spelling Chautauqua, you can always look up historycomesalive.org, and it'll take you to the exact same page. Either way. So you can take your phone out of oh, look, it's turned into a camera. Okay. You can take your phone out of airplane mode, and thank you all for turning out. And like I said, if you would just take a chair back towards the back, and you can stack up on a stand, or just leave the chairs back there, and we are all set. Once again, for Dr. Marion Strobel and her presentation on Lucy.